Hello, everybody. This is No Gonna Kid here, and today I'm gonna talk to you about my new fan fiction idea, the Addams Family Tree. So, here it is. So, basically, the Addams Family Tree is my own sort of Addams Family crossover with the lesser known Addams Family sort of Flintstones parody families of the Frankenstones and the Gruesomes. Those two are parodies of the actual Addams family from the Flintstones and the Monsters. No, wait, scratch that. These the actual uh, Frankenstones and the Gruesomes are actually from the Flintstones, but they're parodies of shows like the Addams Family and the Monsters, respectively. So with that being said, that's sort of the whole thing on that, and it would be kind of cool to see them, all three of them, more or less in one crossover event. So basically, when it comes to this sort of crossover event, it's gotta be more or less, my version of the Addams family, but in the Addams family in the sense that it's heavily based on the actual uh, 1992 Hanna-Barbera version of the Addams Family. So picture one of the animated shows on Hanna-Barbera's 90s cartoons for the Addams Family, and my version is heavily based on that. So basically, how this crossover is gonna start is more or less this whole thing is that um, where basically Anna's family is on the state park where they're basically in the middle of a thunderstorm, raging thunderstorm, and they're just having a good time. It's like I imagine like Gomez saying like, "Oh, what a beautifully dreary morning, isn't that, Morticia?" And literally like Morticia just like basking in the rain and like sleet and like, "Oh, what a morbidly horrific morning." Like they're just enjoying themselves and stuff. So basically, Pugsley, once they're all playing as well, Pugsley being Pugsley, he's trying to actually hit Wednesday with a bunch of rockets and stuff, and he's like, "God dang, I always miss." So basically, Wednesday's like, "Your aim is getting sloppy. You might want to aim higher." So, heeding her advice, basically Pugsley fires a giant bottle rocket that basically lands on a nearby mountainside and unearths a certain two families from a bunch of ice. Turns out they're the Gruesomes and the Frankenstones, who, for after the events of the Flintstones, they kind of end up frozen ice, cryogenically frozen on the side of the mountain for the better half of like a couple of thousand years. And the reason being is that um, I'm guessing seeing how they're neighbors to the Flintstones, and since probably basically the Flintstones kind of ended where like Pebbles and Batman grew up to have their own kids, and once they moved out, and once the neighborhood got more or less changed, more or less, because Bedrock is situated where the park is now. So basically, Bedrock's new neighbors, and especially essentially the Flintstones' more new normal neighbors are like, "Hey, we don't like your other neighbors. You mean what? You mean the rebels? No, the other ones, the freaks. Like the Frankenstones, the Gruesomes. Yeah, they need to go. They dropping their property value here, and we need to have them out of sight, out of mind, more or less." And of course, the Flintstones try to talk them down, but the angry mob that is the neighborhood watch is like, "Hey, the Frankenstones, the Gruesomes, you need to go." And of course, the Frankenstones and Gruesomes, they're used to moving and they're used to angry mobs at this point. So it's like, "Well, it's been nice knowing you, Flintstones. You too, Rebels. But we gotta split. We can't stay here." So basically, while being chased by the angry mob, they more or less run into a foul with an avalanche and got frozen. All the two families. So yeah, basically, Frank, Hidia, Atrocia, Stubby, um, Gabi, Ghastly. Yeah, basically both families got frozen ice, and of course for the most part, like Bedrock, the citizens of Bedrock, like, hey, good, they're gone. We can move on with our lives, which is kind of a horrible thing. But this is literally caveman time, so of course there will be like prejudice as fuck. So with that being said, thousands upon thousands of years, like 12,000 plus years have passed, and since then the actual uh, more or less the whole thing with them is that they're now unearthed by the Addams family. And the Addams family was like, wait, these guys look familiar. Yeah, they kind of look like us. So literally Gomez is kind of trying to actually piece together who they are more or less from the family photo album. And of course, they're the very first famous family. So the Gruesomes and the Frankenstones and their descendants would end up becoming the essentially the Addams family we all know, with the Addams family members descending from them. So with that being said, that's the whole thing with the actual like Addams family, Frankenstein's and the Gruesomes meeting. So I could also imagine like a bunch of them more or less hitting off well. Like basically they're all family essentially, so they're gonna hit off well, and more or less I can honestly see the actual Frankenstein's and the Gruesomes trying to fit into human society again and trying to fit into modern times. And what better teachers than the Addams family, right? I mean, it's this point it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. So it just this whole modern day uh, ghoulish family is now accompanied by their distant ancestors, and now there's more of them. So it's like, well, there goes the neighborhood, more or less. With that being said, I can honestly a couple of things happening. Like, for example, like Wednesday and like Trosha are like hitting off pretty well. Like I could see like a Trosha being like fascinated by modern technology, or rather than modern technology. It is the 90s, so literally it's like, ooh, what's this beautiful? Wait, you have like record players still? Awesome. Where's the little bird? And like Wednesday, kind of like, well, we don't use birds anymore. Everything's mechanical now. It's like fascinating. And of course, they'll probably have a sleepover, like a ghoulish sleepover, where these sleeping crypts and like talk about like horror movies and all that stuff. Stubby, Gobby, and Pugsley would pretty much wreck the whole town with pranks and like whole bunch of different antics that kind of like they'll be public menaces, more or less. And that's gonna be their whole thing is they just wreak havoc all over the town. Like I can see like Gobby's whole pet spider Schneider terrifying the populace. Like, why is everybody so afraid of Schneider? He didn't do anything wrong. And it's like, and then Pugs would pretty much be like, I guess people don't appreciate a good pet when they see them. And of course, everybody's afraid because he's a freaking giant spider that these little kids are riding on. So of course they'll be afraid. So yeah, so yeah, that's sort of the whole thing on that. But here's the other thing. The other thing is that like, um, yeah, trying to gather my thoughts on this. Basically, the Gruesomes also have essentially the Gruesomes, Frankenstones, and the Addams family also share a common where basically I can imagine like um, weirdly Gomez and Frank are just ogling their wives, like Morticia, Creepella, and Hydia, as more or less, like they get into like modern day fashion and modern day swimsuits, and like literally the husband's like, "Hey guys, are we lucky or what?" And literally like Frank and weirdly is like, "Oh yes, we're definitely lucky." So with that being said, that's kind of the whole thing on that. Is that it's gonna be one big giant ass family reunion between the Gruesomes, the Frankenstones, and the actual um, Addams family. As more or less, that's kind of the whole thing. Is as them being one giant weird ass family while essentially the whole terrified populace is like, crap, what am I supposed to do now? So this is kind of like karma, and like there, yeah, I bet you top dollar that like the Bedrock citizens and the modern day citizens in the modern day are descendants from each other, and now it's like, man, what the fuck did our ancestors do to give us this karmic punishment? So that's sort of the whole thing on that. And that's my whole idea of the Addams Family tree. Is a fun little Addams Family AU that I kind of thought up recently and been working on for the past year, like past couple months. So, yep, that's kind of like my fan fiction idea. And this is the Okinawa Kid signing out.